WarsawJS.
So thanks for having me. I'm actually one of those persons who are the first time here today on WarsawJS, but I'm sure it will be not my last time. And my talk will be about linting, linting with ESLint. So who of you already used ESLint in your projects?
I did.
Great, almost everyone, cool. So I'm aware that linting is maybe not the most exciting thing in the world, in JavaScript programming world. It's not like new JavaScript framework or new React version, but I hope I will be able to convince you, if you're not already convinced, that it is fun, it is useful, and it has good impact on your project, especially when you have a big project with many people involved. So let's start. What we're going to cover in this talk, we will be talking about what are the benefits, what can we expect from having a linter incorporated in the project, what problems we can solve with it, and with the second part, more technical part, we are going to learn how to build a custom ESLint rule to meet our needs, our special needs. And the last thing will be how to approach linting in existing project when you have like project running for months, years, with many people involved, maybe legacy project, maybe not, how to approach linting in that situation. So let's start about why do we even should care about linting, how it can help us. So let me tell you. I see some background noise. Okay, better. So one of the stories from my experience, it's like Friday afternoon, and your colleague is slacking you and asking you, hey, I've got this small PR. Can I have a code review from your side? Simple stuff. I just want to, check in before the weekend. I want to have it on production next week. Can you help me? And you say, oh, yes, no problem. Just small PR. Until you look closer and you see how many files it's changed, and you can see how big it is. And generally, code reviews are great. They bring many value. But when it comes to reviewing bigger changes, more complicated changes, they often fail. It's hard and difficult at the same time to focus on, code style and architecture, check the business requirements, check all the changes that meet the code quality and best practices and standards and so on. Okay, especially I have problems with code review when I do them via the GitHub, and this is most common way, I think. You can only see those parts that changed. A lot of code is hidden from you. It's hard to see the big picture. It's easy to miss like linting problems, like warnings. It's not clear, for example, why this method, this function is in this place, not the other, and it's easy to miss many things. And one thing we recommend you is to do code review from IDEs. We are doing it from IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code. And then you can see more. You can see the context of the change. You can see the warning, the linting errors that I will be talking about in a minute. But even if you do your best in the code review, you will find some issues, ask somebody to rename some methods or functions, to fix some stuff. It's not the fastest feedback you can get. Probably someone is already working on something else, waiting for review, and he or she has to go back to this PR, fix those issues, and it's taking a lot of time. This feedback loop is very, very long. So the question is, how can we do that sooner? How we can have this feedback loop shorter? And one way to improve this is pair programming. And who has ever done some pair programming? Well, guys from my team, thank you. Some people did it, and I know it's not everyone like it, and it's difficult sometimes to sit with someone else and expose yourself, like all your drawbacks, all your things that you're actually not good at coding, but it's also good learning practice. And pair programming is a little bit like code review, like continuous code review, because you have somebody from your team, a person sitting next to you, giving you instant feedback. So he or she is watching your back, pointing at the places when you can make some errors, suggesting some better solutions, and it's like code review going online, right? But on the other hand, you cannot be always available for pair programming. If you have a lot of junior engineers in the project, you don't have physical time to sit and pair program with them all the time. And like I said, not everyone enjoys it. So what to do then? Here comes the linting for the rescue. And it's also similar to pair programming in some ways. For me, it is like you have someone sitting in your computer, in your IDE, and telling you what to do, like giving you some advices, giving you some tips, giving you some suggestions, like, hey, it's a better way to do this, hey, don't do this, it could lead to potential problems, hey, maybe you can use this method instead of that one. All the thing is done by ESLint. And if you write some ESLint rule or enable ESLint rule in your project, you like getting some kind of superpowers. You can multiply yourself, get into people's computers, and suggest them some things that you normally would like suggest them on a code review or pair programming session. So this is cool, and I'll be talking today about ESLint. This is most popular linter for JavaScript environment, and basically it statically analyzes your code to find some problems, find some better ways to do this, do some stuff, and it also can fix some problems for you. And basically, it's supported by most of the modern IDEs, and this is sample config from ESLint. Basically, it's a bunch of rules that you agreed to enable, to check in your code. Good things are that you can share the config, you can share it among your teams in your company, in other projects. You can write plugins, and you can write custom rules. And this is what I'll be showing today, some custom rules tailored for your project needs. And if we have that ESLint set up in our project, what can we do with it? So apart of like showing errors or warnings while we code in our IDE, we can connect it with our continuous integration pipeline to check if we don't have any errors or warnings. And we can also run this linter task in the pre-commit hook, like we use it with lint stage library to run it on stage files before we do commit. So we want to have this feedback as soon as possible, right? So even before we do commit, we want to make sure that we have all the errors or warnings taken care of. So today I'm going to give you some examples of custom or regular linter rules that can improve test speed and reduce flakiness of test, and for some good architecture practices, catch potential bugs and improve the code readability. Those 4 things that ESLint can help you. Okay, so let's jump to some concrete examples. So first one, about improving the test speed. So we had a situation in our project that the library that we use for testing, React testing library, was awful slow with get by role. method. It was causing a lot of flackiness in our test. It's not that bad right now. We actually didn't, we're actually not using this rule that I'm showing you right now because it got a little bit faster. But it's a good example. So we want to avoid using this default getByRole method with for fetching, for example, buttons, finding buttons on the page. We want to replace it with our custom that will be faster, right? And what to do now? We can tell everybody, hey, use this method instead of that one on Slack, and hope that everyone will remember. And then we can look at the PRs and look that if everyone is using the good method, not the wrong one. But it's difficult to remember about it. So we wrote the rule. It basically showed the warning saying that, hey, avoid this method, use other one, right? And how to write that kind of rule? To write it, let's take a look about something called AST, Abstract Syntax Tree. It's the Abstract Syntax Tree is the result of parsing JavaScript code, and it's presenting the whole JavaScript code on the graph containing on the tree containing representation of all the elements that we have in our code. So in this example, we have some kind of function defined with 2 arguments. It's summing 2 numbers, and then we have a variable declaration, and we are calling this method. So the representation of this code on the abstract syntax tree looks like this. It has some starting node program that is available always for all the code. And then we see function declaration node, variable declaration for the result variable. Oh, sorry, I switched the slide. Gets back. Then we have identifier for the result, call expression for calling the sum function. It has also some arguments not visible here, but the whole syntax tree can be seen with this tool. And for our concrete example, we want to take care of the screen getByRole with button parameter. So we can also see how to find this node on the tree. It's a member expression because we call it on the screen. It has some identifier with name. It has also some arguments. So having that knowledge, we can start writing our custom rule. And ESLint provides a create function that is returning the object. And here we can provide the callback function. I hope that you can see it on the back. The callback function, what to do if ESLint parsing AST3 will match the node with some code. So in our case of getByRole method, we are trying to catch the call expression node. And then we are checking if this node is actually the member expression with proper name that we are looking for, and if it has expected argument button, if it's the actual call of our method. Here we are using the node type. We can also use selectors. I will show the example later to match the visitor function going down the tree. And next nice thing about ESLint and the custom rules is that we can test them easily. ESLint provides the rule tester. We can put some valid examples and invalid examples of code that should not trigger and should trigger our rule, and it's easy to test to make sure that our rule is proper. Okay, so in the result, we've got this kind of warning, and it helps us to tell people that they should avoid this particular method. Okay, next example, improving code readability. So it's about code comments. At some point in our project, we decided that code comments are bringing a lot of noise to our code. It becomes not readable, and we wanted to get rid of comments. But we wanted to have exception for block comments. So we didn't allow that kind of comments, but block comments were okay. And we also created a rule for this. There are some existing rules that can achieve something similar, but we had the problem with separating block comments from other comments, so we have to create a custom rule. And this one is kind of similar. We using the context. Context is provided by the ESLint. We can get some things from context like source code. And here we are using the program node, so we are scanning all the file from the top node. And if for all the comments, we are doing some kind of check if this comment should be allowed or not. Okay, and next example is about enforcing some architecture decision or best practices. So for a little bit context, we are using hexagonal architecture in our project. It's also known as ports and adapters, or onion architecture. It has many names. And here we used a check file plugin for ESLint that allows to enforce some consistent naming. So our rules were that, for example, the file with prefix router can only be created in application folder, and file with prefix port should go to domain or shared kernel, and API should go into infrastructure. Right? So simple rule, and can enforce that people with put files in good places will not be doing some kind of mess. So next rule that we use for enforcing architecture practices so was about not allowing to create constructors with too many parameters. So here we are actually using AST selectors to restrict that. For example, in the bottom one, if we have class with name ending with adapter, so this is our adapter in our architecture, and we are looking at the constructor, and it has more than 3 parameters, then fire the error with message that adapter shouldn't have too much dependencies, right? So that kind of simple things that help people to apply to best practices that we agreed on. And the last example is about catching some potential bugs. So it is also custom rule that checking that handler is present in our router config. So we decided that for each router method that is doing post or put, we should have a schema check to make sure that the request is valid. And our rule was created to make sure that no one forgets about adding this this handler to check the schema. So you can see if there is a router with post defined and it doesn't have the handler for validating the schema, we are getting the warning, right? Okay, so everything looks okay to this point. I hope I convinced you that this linting is useful and fun and powerful. But that said, it can be difficult to enable to start linting in existing projects, right? If you go back to your project and add some linter rules that you find in existing plugins, you probably get a lot of warnings instantly, right? Because they will start to checking your code, and you'll probably have a lot of violations at the start. So how to deal with this problem? So basically it's a problem with existing tech debt, right? You have some problems with code, some tech debt that is now surfacing with those ESLint rules. And first law in this situation is just stop making it worse, right? Just stop adding this tech debt. Stop making it worse. So we came to this same problem when we, for example, enabled the rule to give a warning or error when someone used code comments. So there are few options, right? For first option is to enable the ESLint rule as a warning. So you will just get a bunch of warnings, like hundreds of them, and you'll have to live with them. So it will not be blocking your pipeline, it will be not blocking someone from committing, but you will just have a lot of warnings when you build your projects. And it's not the best solution because when you have 1, 3, or even few warnings, it's very easy to add another one. Like it's the effect of broken windows. So if you have already one failing test on your pipeline, it's okay to add another one, right? It was already failing. You have one flaky test, oh, another one will be not the problem because it was already flaky, right? So when you keep those warnings in your code, it's getting worse and worse. It will not get better. Second option is to enable it as an error, right? So every time that the comment is found in code, ESLint will be throwing error. It will stop you from building a project, right? So it's not the good solution, right? Because it will force you to fix all the warning immediately because otherwise the development will be blocked. So finally, the third way to do this, we find another way to do this, to allow introducing some new rules into existing projects step by step without some major breaking changes. And for this, we use the tool called ESLint. And it allows you to turn new rules as a warnings and prevents you from making more violations that you already had at the point when you enabled the ESLint. So first you have to do the first run, and it's saving the record of every violations that you have in your project. And next, when you run it, if the number of violations is the same, it does nothing. It allows you to commit your code, no problems. If the number of violations gets bigger, you will get an error, right? You cannot increase the number of violations. When it gets lower, it's okay. It will update his records, and next time it will compare with the new number of violations. So it is good for introducing some changes step by step. This is example config. You just put what kind of rules you want ESLint to observe, to measure. You have to put all of them that already exist in your project. And you can then add it to your pipeline to run, to update the stage record file every time it is run. So this record file looks something like this. So for every file that has some violation, it remembers the number of rules that are generating warnings or errors. And it's comparing each time the record with the new state. And this is what we use to like not to make things worse, right? To have some defined state. But ultimately you want to get better, right? You want to fix those rules, all the warnings and errors. And how to do this? We have two ideas for this. One is called optimistic refactoring, also known as Boy Scout rule from Uncle Bob. It's just like when you see some code that needs some fixes. For example, you open your IDE and you see like it's lighted up like Christmas tree with some warnings, errors, and stuff like this. Just spend some time to fix some low-hanging fruits, like that can be fixed easily without like delaying you much with your work. And ESLint has some nice thing about those small changes. So it allows to acknowledge and recognize when someone is fixing some kind of violations and warnings, because normally it's not visible on GitHub, right? Somebody will fix a warning, commit the code on GitHub, and then PR, it's not visible, right? So why to even bother? But with ESLint, you can actually see that someone like make the extra effort and fix some warnings, and you can just acknowledge it and recognize it. And when this work is visible, it's really motivating people to do this. Other thing we did is something called warnings cleanup session. So we just gather a bunch of people in a room. We figure out what rules are making us much problems. We identify how to fix them and like spend 2-3 hours mob programming or pair programming to get rid as much as we could. So what's in the end? What's waiting for you? The reward is to have no warnings in your code. Max warning equals 0. And it's really good feeling and good for your code and for your team. So I hope you will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michał. Lipka, yes?
Lipski, yes.
Lipski, przepraszam, bo nie czytałem. That was a great presentation. I actually learned something, as I always do when I'm here. Does anyone have any questions for Michał?
Yes.
You have a lot of really complicated rules. So how do you understand that it's time to add a new rule, for example, in terms of architecture or in terms of comments? I don't know.
The question was when we recognize the situation when we want to add a new rule, right? So basically, when it starts to hurt us, so code review is getting worse and worse. We have to like explain the same things again, and we see the same errors coming in the pull request again. So basically, this is the time to introduce some rule, right? And you can recognize it by the situation when someone on Slack is writing message to everyone, hey guys, look out, there is new util method that we should use, don't use the old one, it's deprecated, right? That kind of message is trigger to, hey, maybe automate it, maybe just write an ESLint rule, so that not everyone will have to remember about it. So this is the time that you can consider to write a rule.
So can you share a bit how a team can decide what rules can be applied in the repository? Because, as you know, people get really strict about some of their ideas about how to write code, and there are a large team of 20 people where everyone needs to agree. So we had this famous tabs versus spaces wars, for example, which is quite silly, but it can get very intense when it's something more complicated. So what is your take on that?
Okay, so for like existing plugins and rules, we use some standards that are recommended from big companies. They are like putting the plugins and exporting the rules they are used. But for custom, we first decide what should be our approach in that particular situation. So for this, we use architecture decision records. They are documents that we put the reasoning why we want to do something, some decision, right? Why some decision was made and what we expect of it. So, for example, I showed you the rule that was enforcing some architecture. good practices. So before that, we have this architecture decision that we want to use this architecture, and it was agreed with everyone in the team, and like everyone agreed, we are checking in this agreement into our source code, and from that point, everyone is aware that that it should be used. Then we can introduce the rule to make sure that this decision is obeyed, right?
Like, I'm very curious about what you said about handling legacy code, and like, can you explain a bit in detail, like how did you decide to use that tool? Like for me, like first, like there was Boy Scout principle, but there is another principle: if it works, if it is production, like don't touch it, because you're spending like some resources with zero business value and like with possible bugs that could arise. And like for this specific tool, like for me, like I saw that it is merge conflict each time you touch the code base. So like in big team, like how you deal with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this tool, this ESLint, keeps this record file, and actually you can have some conflicts when a lot of people changing and removing the rules, but we haven't too much, I think, problems with that. We have like 25 people in the team, and it was very rare that someone has a conflict. And why we even do this, why we even care, you said it's not like business value in it, but we saw some kind of business value in keeping our code clean, because within a time, project got bigger and bigger, and it took a lot of time on code review to make sure that all the good practices are applied, so time wasted on code review. And the second thing is code readability. Also a lot of time saved on having readable code, because when you think about it, the most time you spend on your day job in front of computer when you're programming is not writing new code, not adding new code. It's most probably reading code, right? Scanning the code, looking for the place when you want to start your new functionality, or looking for a bug, or trying to understand how the code works. So it's really important and beneficial to put effort in keeping clean code, and it will be benefit for the future, right?
That is spoken clearly from experience. You didn't have to check
Yeah, I've been there.
you didn't have to check your notes for that. Can we give another hand to Michał, please?
Thanks.
Thank you. Folks,